Our next guest flunked high school, but now has 4 honorary doctorates. As Vancouver City Staff homeless advocate, she felt sitting behind a desk all day was wrong. The administration didn't agree. On her own time, late at night, she would walk through the alleys of the downtown east side, doing the job the way she thought it should be done, representing us. She engaged people as she found them. She was much loved by people living the most tragic lives. They called her the lady in the blue jacket. Please welcome Dr. Judy Graves.
I want you to stay sitting, but turn around in your seats. Take a look all the way to the back of the theater and all the way to that side and that side. Just get a good look at each other. There are about as many people in the theater tonight as there are sleeping outside in the streets of Vancouver. I want you to imagine for a moment that you are the people who are sleeping out. It's been raining off and on all day. Your shoes and socks are soaking wet. Your jacket's a bit wet. Your blanket is wet. The cement is cold. It's time to settle down and go to sleep. Your clothes reek of mildew and you can't get that smell out. People that you used to know, co-workers, people you went to school with, maybe family members, have walked past you today and not acknowledged you. They don't look at your face. They think that if they speak to you, you might lunge at them like a rabid dog. You're feeling sick. Vancouver is not a no-kill shelter in the streets. Because you are homeless, you are going to die 20 or 30 years earlier than you would if you'd been inside all the time. And you can feel it in your bones, you can feel it creeping up on you. So someone like me comes to you and looks into your face and says, "Hey, winter's coming and it's pretty nasty out here. How about if I find you a place to live?" And of course, you say yes, please, please, because a human body is not meant to live outside in a modern city. But now it's time for me to panic. As I look at you, I think if I work hard at the advocacy, I can probably get 3 of you into subsidized housing in a decent building sometime over this winter. I can probably get 20 of you into a scuzzy little room in a residential hotel in the downtown east side. I'll get about a half of you into a winter shelter when it opens up. And maybe tonight, there's enough beds left in the city that I could take 2 of you to a shelter. But because the 2 of you are coming into the shelter, 2 other people are going to sleep outside. And that's just how it is. And there are probably about 15 of you who sometime over the next decade are going to die in the streets without ever having found housing. There is no reason for this. There is no good reason. None of you should have been homeless in the first place. Those of us who are old, and I would count anybody, say, over 55, will remember back to Vancouver Vancouver before the 1990s, when you would go downtown and you would never see somebody sleeping on a sidewalk. When we could have counted the number of homeless in the city on 2 hands. When there were a few guys that rode the railroad across the continent who would be in town for a few days and out again. When there was a few university students maybe feeling a little bit wild for a couple of months. When there was a couple of old men who preferred to spend their money on beer than rent. But that's not how it is anymore. And if you ask an urban planner what they are doing about homelessness, they'll say, well, we build for the rich and the housing trickles down to the poor. They are still teaching that in the planning schools today. But look at the reality of Vancouver. You go to Strathcona, where the little cabins that were built for the railway workers and their families are now selling for $1 million. And the reality is that the housing that was built for the poor is trickling up to the rich. We don't have housing. We need a vacancy rate. You need a vacancy rate in housing for the very poor. When I come to you, homeless in the street, and I say, how much do you have to spend on rent? You'll tell me $375 for a month. There is nothing that you can rent for $375. How much money do you have for the entire month to cover everything? Just over $600. If I find you a room that costs $400 or $500, the difference is coming out of your food. There is nothing like the world that we grew up in. When the city was covered with little old rooming houses, and you couldn't walk down a block that there weren't 2 room for rent signs. And it was easy to stay housed, no matter how young you were, no matter how bad you were, no matter how many times you were evicted. There was always another room down the street to move into. That world is completely gone. The land has trickled up to the rich. And now cities, provinces, the federal government is trying to deal with it one person at a time, as if it was your personal issues that have caused your homelessness. But what has caused homelessness is a refusal of planners to read the census data, to recognize that as cities grow, there's a larger number of rich people, a larger number of middle-income people, and a larger number of very poor people. That you cannot keep knocking down the housing that poor people live in, that you cannot keep taking away that low rental housing without creating homelessness. It has nothing to do with the individual. You can see this more easily in small towns, but it has happened with like clockwork. In Vancouver, we remember the West End was gentrified first. The tall buildings were built and nobody could afford to move into them. So we all moved over to Kitsilano. And all of those old rooming houses were torn down and the 3-story walk-ups were built and we couldn't afford them, so we moved into Falls Creek Slopes. And then we moved to Commercial Drive, and then we moved until now. There's nothing but the downtown East Side SROs that a poor person can live in. And even those now are being gentrified. So a person on welfare is fighting against a person who is perhaps on their senior's pension or a young hipster with a bit of an income to get inside. And gradually, as those SROs disappear, a building at a time, more and more people are living in the street. The only way to end this is to consider urban planning a measure of public health. In order to keep people alive, we are going to have to get ahead of the curve. We're going to have to build more housing than we have very poor people. There has to be a bit of a vacancy rate so that we can have all of you living inside, safe and healthy.